So rectangles, rhombuses, and squares are all special parallelograms. Which means they have all the properties of parallelograms. So opposite sides are parallel, opposite angles are congruent, the diagonals bisect each other, opposite sides are congruent, and consecutive angles are supplementary. All of the properties of parallelograms are inherited by rectangles, rhombuses, and squares. And then they have their own special properties. So rectangles have the special property that they have 4 right angles. So it's a parallelogram that has 4 right angles. Now another thing that comes from that is that makes the diagonals be congruent. So rectangles also have congruent diagonals. So AD, this side right here, is 7.5 centimeters, and DC down here is 10 centimeters. We want to find the length of DB. Now, a few things, there's a few ways we can go about this, but since this is a rectangle, we know it's a rectangle because it has 4 congruent angles, 4 right angles. That means that it's a parallelogram, which means that since this is 7.5 centimeters on the left, this side on the right is also 7.5. Opposite sides are congruent. Same thing with the top and the bottom. Since this is 10 at the bottom, this is also 10 at the top. But we're asked to find something about the diagonal DB. When we draw that in with these sides that we know some stuff about, we get a right triangle. So we get a right triangle with a side of 7.5 and another side of 10. We're trying to find the third side, the hypotenuse. And to find that, we can do the Pythagorean theorem. Which works for right triangles, and it just says that the hypotenuse squared equals the sum of the 2 legs squared. Some usually better known as a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Square the 2 legs, add them together, that equals the hypotenuse squared. So that means we can find this side up there. We could call it x, we could also call it c if you wanted to. 10 squared plus 7.5 squared equals x squared. So 10 squared is 100. 7 squared is 56.25. So you add those two together, you get 156.25 equals x squared. So to get x, you do the square root of 156.25. And that is 12.5. So dB is 12.5 centimeters. Now for the next one, AB 17. BC is 12.75. Trying to find DB, so we could call the opposite sides congruent because we know that they are. Or if you just found what diagonal AC was, since the diagonals are congruent, you could just do it that way. Whatever you get for AC, you would also get for DB. So that's another Pythagorean theorem. A squared, so 17 squared plus B squared, which is 12.75 squared, equals C squared, or X squared if you want. 17 squared is 289. 12.75 squared is 162.5625. Add that up and you get 451.5625. And then you take the square root to find what C is, and you get C equals 21.25, and those are all centimeters. So a rhombus is also a parallelogram. It's a special parallelogram. And the special thing about a rhombus is that all four sides are congruent. They all have the same length. So a rhombus is a parallelogram. All four sides are congruent. Since it's a parallelogram, that means it gets those 5 parallelogram properties. In addition, the diagonals are perpendicular. And each diagonal bisects the opposite angles. So the diagonals are angle bisectors. So rhombus has the 5 properties of parallelograms, 4 congruent sides, perpendicular diagonals, and the diagonals are angle bisectors. So it gets a couple added properties. So this is a rhombus, we're told, and we need to find xy. So we are finding this side down there. All 4 sides are congruent, so it doesn't matter which side length we solve for, they're all going to be the same because it's a rhombus. So that means that VW and WX are also congruent. They're congruent to each other, and they're congruent to the side that we're trying to find. So since they're congruent to each other, we get an equation. 6m minus 12 equals 4m plus 4. Solve for m, you get 2m equals 16, so m equals 8. We want to know how long the side length is, so plug in 8. 4 times 8 is 32, plus 4 is 36. So all the sides are of the length of 36. Then to find the measure of angle YVW, that's this entire angle up there, we have to use a couple of properties. We first have to find out the value of n. So we can get that right here. the diagonals are perpendicular. So that means that that right there is a 90-degree angle. So 3n squared minus 0.75 equals 90 degrees. Because the diagonals are perpendicular. So 3n squared equals 90.75. Divide by 3 and you get n squared equals 30.25. And you take the square root to find that n is 5.5. So to find the value of, or the measure of angle YVW, we're going to have to plug it in to find out what we get for that portion up there. So 9 times 5.5 plus 4 is 53.5. But that's not the angle we're asked about. That's only half of it. We know it's exactly half because the diagonals bisect the angles. The diagonals are angle bisectors. So if this is 53.5, so is the other side of the diagonal. We just have to do 53.5 times 2, and that will give us the entire length, or the entire angle measure we want. So times 2, you get 107 degrees. So we had to use a couple properties. Diagonals are perpendicular. Also, diagonals are angle bisectors. Measure of angle VYX. VYX. So we just found that this whole angle right here is 107. So VYX, because a rhombus is a parallelogram, that means consecutive angles have to be supplementary. So 180 minus 107, 73 degrees. And then the last angle we're asked to find right here is angle XYZ, just that portion of it. Since we just found that that entire angle, VYX, is 73, XYZ is going to be half of that because the diagonals bisect the angles. So do 73 divided by 2 is 36.5 degrees because the diagonals bisect the angles.